Sorry, I'm not a lady, obviously. My name is Guinness. I work in the European Commission, but obviously I'm here in private capacity. Mr. Guinness, thank you very much for this, for your intervention and for your keynote speak. I have just one question. I follow you completely when it comes to freedom, but in the end, I wonder whether it's not a question, where does the freedom come from? Who endows us with the freedom? Is it us who are actually left alone and we give the freedom to each of us and we write it into a constitution and then we have to check that it is actually applied, or is it something external?
If we're looking at the very nature of freedom, I would argue, if we want to go much deeper, that a Christian view of freedom has three essential parts. One is a gift of God, ultimately. So, for instance, you have our new atheists who are now saying freedom is an illusion. Sam Harris and many others, because they cannot find through science alone where freedom comes from. It's a gift. Secondly, it's relational. We discover our freedom in relationship with others, with God, with our families and people we grew up with. And thirdly, freedom requires truth. That's part of what I meant by positive freedom. And so certainly for followers of Jesus, well, put it this way, the most popular, nearly universal motto on university walls is, the truth shall set you free. But many people who quote that forget that those are the words of Jesus, and he's referring to his followers knowing his truth, and that would be the basis for that positive view of freedom which we need. So bare freedom will never be enough. It's a gift, it's grown into in relationship, and it assumes and requires a strong view of truth. Now, those arguments we have to make persuasively to others with different views of truth or no foundation for their truth.
Margaret Peters, thank you very much, sir, for your intervention. I want to come back to your remark about interest or love. Do you not believe that a major flaw of the modern Western state was to be founded on the basis of a contractual mentality, on a citizen who was a mere individual, who was not a person made for love, out of love, a person, member of the family? I have done some work on human rights, and I noticed that the father was absent from all human rights declarations and treaties, which is very significant. Because if we are made in the image of God, God is love. God is the Trinity.
There's an echo going all around. It's actually very hard to hear you. I can hear it in terms of volume, but not the specifics of the echo. I only got the bit at the end, so I may have missed much of your point.
Your remark about the interest versus love.
St. Augustine.
Yes. Don't you believe that a flaw of the modern Western democracy was to be founded on a contract that is on interest, not on the person made for love?
There's some argument today whether we should follow what they call geopolitics or theopolitics. In other words, what you're saying refers to one strand of Western thinking. And so Cicero, Machiavelli, Hobbes, Locke, and all that are only interested in interest. That's absolutely right. But then you get down to a very secular understanding. Whereas the others would say, no, we've got to take the place of faith and the things that people love supremely. Now, of course, Christians would say, Augustine would say, what people love supremely may be an ordered love that's worthy, and I hope freedom would be like that. But it could equally be a disordered love, like a patriotism that is inflated into nationalism and becomes incredibly dangerous. But I think it's important in a world which doesn't take faith very seriously, say in international affairs and many affairs, that we introduce the place of what people love supremely. Of course they have interests too. I'm not denying that. I hope I got roughly to your question. It's very difficult to understand, forgive me.
My name is João Vargas, I'm from Portugal. I'm an advisor to a member of the European Parliament. Some years ago, it's not a comment, it's just a question, but some years ago I was struck by a sentence by a British philosopher, Roger Scruton, who said that people are being offered nowadays an inclusive nothing. So my question is, how can we, as politicians or helpless politicians, reopen the public square and offer people those values instead of this inclusive nothing that is being offered all over?
The early church, part of its great appeal of sharing and living the gospel was over against the sense of fate and pessimism and hopelessness that philosophies like Stoicism and other things, Epicureanism in its corrupt forms, were giving them. And the Christian faith gave incredible hope. Today we're often viewed as the tired ones and the old faith. But I think when we read people like Richard Dawkins and many of the new atheists, you can see something of that old pre-Christian futility creeping back in again. Now, which means that we have to articulate the Christian faith in ways which address the whole of life with tremendous positive hope. And if we do that, clearly it will prevail powerfully. But we can't do it in ways in the European past that were coercive. We have to be, for instance, persuasive. So certainly much of the current mood, I don't know, was that Roger Scruton you were quoting? Maybe you know the context, John, you know? I haven't read that particular phrase himself. But clearly you have a sort of mishmashy inclusiveness which rebounds. I mean, 20 years ago liberals talked diversity. Now they're stressing uniformity, non-discrimination, equality, in ways which are denial of diversity and become extremely coercive. So we've got to take them on. But generally speaking, we can trust the fact, while many people view the Christian faith as the old faith, and you have what someone's called the ABC moment, anything with Christianity, that is beginning to pass. And with the pessimism you see so widely, the gospel is shining clearer and clearer by contrast. And we should have no fear, and with courage and creativity and compassion, proclaim it on every occasion.
My name is Konrad Szymanski. I'm a member of the European Parliament from Poland. You mentioned that the French Revolution was just a reaction for the coercive nature of the Ancien regime. It sounds even like a full justification of the whole process, and I'm afraid it's a little bit too optimistic. Maybe we should put a little bit more attention to the corrupted nature of humankind, and also the role of evil in history, to understand better the dynamics of our civilization, not only in historical perspective, but also nowadays.
Again, if I heard you right, I wasn't saying the French Revolution was a product of that. What I would argue, the French settlement of religion and public life, today's laïcité, is a product of that. In other words, you had the mentality after the revolution, if you were in favor of faith, you were a reactionary. And if you're in favor of freedom, you must be a secularist. And that's in a great deal of the French mentalité still. And of course, it was that vision of religion and public life which is picked up by Ataturk. And you have it there in Turkey and other places. So the revolution itself had far deeper and wider causes. But if you read any great book on, say, secularization in Europe, such as David Martin's, who's a sociologist and an Anglican minister, and he was the man who blew aside the old view of secularization. The old view was, the more modern we were, the less religious we are. And David Martin showed how that's terribly wrong. And then came the Iranian Revolution, and today in the world, religion is explosively alive. But he pointed out, though, that the major reason, there are many, many others, the major reason for European secularity were the corrupt state churches in the past. And I think we have to take that on with humility and make sure that we go a different way in the future. But not the revolution, just the settlement of religion.
Right here. Yeah, go ahead.
Bartosz Gradecki. If I'm not mistaken, you said that we have enough negative freedom, whereas we don't have enough virtue to sustain it. So obviously the future part is correct, but do you really think that we have enough negative freedom? Isn't that the case that we have less and less of it? And isn't this creating a contrast between negative freedom and the future also not a very helpful attitude, because I guess negative freedom is also an important thing even from the Christian perspective.
Well, from a Christian perspective, negative freedom is necessary and preliminary. Christians would start with Christ's redeeming us from sin as the ultimate thing which is crippling our freedom. So we do believe that whether someone's under colonial oppression or sex trafficking or alcoholic addiction or whatever it is, freedom starts with people being freed from whatever is enslaving them. And of course, much of the gospel is about that. But that isn't the end of it. Now, G.K. Chesterton put positive freedom well when he talked about, say you're an animal rights liberator, and you go into a zoo to liberate all the wild animals. You see in one cage a tiger with a big hump strapped to its back, a concrete hump. And in the next cage you see a camel with big black, orange and black rubberized stripes all over it. So neither animal is just lumbering around. Well, how do you free them? You free them both from their cages, because they're wild animals. But you free the tiger from the hump and the stripes away from the camel. Now, you take away the camel's hump, it's no longer a camel. In other words, his point is, you need to know who you are in order to know what you're free for and free to be. So are we as humans just an accident to the universe? Or are we made in the image of God? You can see how human dignity and these things come in very crucial. But we have to begin with negative freedom, and that's a very powerful part of the Christian gospel.
Thank you. Bishop Athanasius, Church of Greece. Church of Greece. I'm Greek, and I thank you for referring a couple of times to Greek values inspired by the Greek civilization that modern Greeks have to rediscover, unfortunately. I wanted to ask you about your remark that we have to develop and think deeply about freedom for. You mentioned that phrase. That's a very interesting remark, and I would like to ask you if you have any specific example, either on a personal level or on a collegial level, about this freedom for. Do you have something in mind? I'm interested in personal witnesses to this freedom for, if you can give us an example. Thank you.
My own view is that we can talk in general about positive freedom, as I was doing. But when we make that individual, that truth of who each of us is supposed to be and can be is actually discovered biblically through the notion of calling. When God calls each of us, all Christians together have a common calling. But each Christian is also unique. And when they follow Jesus in their unique giftedness and various things, they can rise to be what he alone knows they're capable of being. So the general truth of positive freedom, I was saying earlier to others, the notion of we're made in the image of God is immensely powerful over against many of the other positions today. But to make it really individual and personal, it has to be put in the context of each of our calling. So to me, there's two halves of calling. One is be who you are. In other words, we're created uniquely different, made in the image of God. But it's not just that, because that by itself can be static, be who you are. It's also become whom you can become. And C.S. Lewis, he loves George MacDonald, the Scottish fantasist. And MacDonald has one of his unspoken sermons. He was fired from his church, so he wasn't able to preach them publicly. They gave them to his family. He talks in Revelation 3 about people who overcome, and when they meet the Lord face to face, are given a white stone with their name on it, which no one else knows. And MacDonald interprets this as someone who's grown into being what God's called them to be, and they understand it when they meet God face to face. They become what they were called to become. And you have an incredible view of Christian growth in freedom, which is rooted in the notion of calling. So we can make it general, and over against the atheist, to be made in the image of God is a very powerful, high view of positive Christian freedom. But I think then, as individuals, we have to go on to think of our own individual calling before the Lord, and that, as we discover and grow into it, makes us the most free.
Thank you very much for your speech. My name is Maria Schmidt. I'm from Germany, and I started a project for education of the heart and teaching the language of the heart on a scientific base. My question is, due to the great impediment of freedom, the immaturity of so many people, the immaturity of so many people, how can we provide and spread the knowledge and the wisdom to parents how to raise children in order to help them growing up to an emotional health and psychological maturity? Thank you.
Yeah, a great question and a huge question. I was talking about the restoration of civic education. That's obviously mainly from teachers to students, but it should also be from parents to children in a much more conscious way. Now, there are a lot of impediments to this. One is what I call generationalism. The newest relativism is generational. It's a generational thing you wouldn't understand. And one of the effects of that is you don't have a sense of all the seasons of life, so that you grow as you go on right till the end of life. And many of us would say, I'm sure many of you would say with me, I went to Oxford, did a doctorate at Oxford. I learned far more after being at Oxford than all my education up to then, because the whole of life is a matter of growing. And I find all sorts of factors coming today. My son's generation, he's early 30s. I'm amazed how few of his generation read books. Everything, internet news or whatever, they're just shutting themselves off from much of the richness of the past. Or people read contemporary books, but they don't have what C.S. Lewis calls the clean sea breezes of the centuries just blowing through their minds, and so on. So there's a dozen impediments for the way people don't think. I was born in China, and now living in America. But when I went back to China about 10 years ago, an old Chinese gentleman said to me, to be real serious, he said, "You've made a great mistake. You grew up in China where they only respect age. And now you're getting older in America where they only respect youth." Identify all the things around us that stop us growing and learning and stretching all the time until we finish this little life. And we need to identify those and challenge our own families and our own children. Don't go the way of so many. Pascal wrote his magnificent section in Pensée on diversion. I read a book last year talking about all the iPads and all this sort of stuff, calling them weapons of mass distraction. And you can see how many people, they don't think about life. Socrates examined life just as an around. And we need to have the courage to identify these and just blow them apart and challenge those we're with to grow until they end their days and see the Lord.
Good morning. I was told that we have only 5 minutes left.
Okay.
So I would suggest that we could I think there are another 1 or 2 questions. One more. So we do one last one. Yeah. So sorry.
Okay. Good morning. Can you hear me okay? We're Peter Hayes and Mary Bull from Cornwall in the UK, and we've had problems, as some might know, because I think somewhere along the line we anticipated it was going to happen anyway, because we have a policy of not allowing any unmarried couples to share a double bed at the hotel. And homosexuality was never on our radar, but of course it was because of the diversity, because we were in conflict with current diversity policy that we went all through the courts. Now, I wondered what you might think about the judgment last week that came from the Supreme Court in the UK, when the 5 law lords judged that freedom of religion will always trump sexual orientation, and what your feelings might be on that, and how we might work now towards changing that.
Trumps?
Yes, the freedom, because...
The other way around, sure.
Oh, did I? I beg your pardon, yes, I'm sorry. She actually, in her statement, Lady Hale said that the freedom of religion is trumped by sexual orientation. Is that right? Okay?
Yeah.
I just wondered what we could do now towards, changing that, basically.
I don't know all the details of the situation. My heart goes out to you. I was in America. But let me make a more general point. The gays quite explicitly brought in a number of years ago what they called the concept of zero sum. And that if there was anything that contradicted their gay rights, it would have to go in a zero sum game. Well, anyone who knows the history of religious freedom, Roger Williams is one of the great early champions of this, another Englishman. He argued that the tragedy was, as he put it, people under the hatches, when they get to what he called the helm, forget where they came from and treat people the way they objected to being treated. And you can see this is happening right across the Western world, that homosexual rights, which are a civil right, they're not a human right. Civil rights should never trump a human right. Otherwise, the liberals are undercutting the whole branch on which they're sitting. That's the basic problem of it. They should never. But in this zero-sum game, you can see the triumph of equality, which is called non-discrimination, being pressed universally and becoming highly coercive of freedom. Your judges are a good example of people who are ignorant about freedom, especially religious freedom. And the tragedy is, England pioneered that particular one magnificently through Thomas Howells and Roger Williams and many, many others. And sadly, England now is in the forefront of those through ignorance and their misguided policies are ruling out freedom and religious freedom. We've got to stand against this. That's part of what I meant by restoring a robust view of freedom and religious freedom at the heart of things today. We've got to teach people again why it matters and what it is. So my heart goes out to you. I don't know all the details. But any notion that a civil right trumps a human right, or that the gay freedom trumps religious freedom, is abominable.
I'm Walter van der Heuvel from Rotterdam, Netherlands. And I'd like to ask you, from your experience, what is the most appealing and most effective argument you experienced against Illuminism, against its laicite, and this kind of thinking, the thinking of
generally I argue against it on the fact that it's illiberal, in principle. But you can also argue that societies which give freedom of conscience, religious freedom, to everybody, are societies that have, on the one hand, healthy civil societies, and on the other hand, a much greater chance at national social harmony. Well, take, for instance, again, say the healthcare mandates in the United States. The president was violating the religious freedom of the Catholic hospitals. Not only that was a violation of religious freedom, it was stupid. Because what he was doing was killing the goose that laid the golden egg. No faith community in all human history has done more for hospitals than the Roman Catholic Church. And so by denying their freedom, it was not just a violation of religious freedom, he was undercutting the chance of a genuine, robust civil society, which as a liberal he would argue for. So I would broaden the issues to principle, to pragmatic effects, and so on. You know, I often go back to the land of my birth, China. Every year I enter the Chinese Academy of the Social Sciences, and I constantly get Hu Jintao quoted to me, China is a harmonious society. And I say, yes, it is, but you lack the crucial ingredient. You have diversity, incredible diversity in China, and you have relative harmony, yes, but you don't have liberty. The real challenge is to have diversity, achieve harmony, because you always have an expanding liberty. Now, some of our Western countries, including Britain, are having that same challenge now today. But societies that guarantee and protect freedom of conscience for everybody and work out how a civil society can negotiate all these challenges has a great chance of being robust in its civil society and harmonious overall. Those who deny it have the opposite. So there's a principled debate, but also a pragmatic debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for these great questions and again for this great thought. If I may, I would just share one thought, because you said that you've done a mistake moving from China to America, and I think life has done a mistake in my life, because I was born in totalitarian Slovakia, where people praised and valued internal freedom, and now I live in a free Slovakia, where people focus only on the external freedom, which they have completely lost the internal. Many of them are not so important anymore. So I would like to ask to put our hands together for us again. And I now have the privilege to introduce our first panel discussion on human rights and human nature, which will be chaired by Sofia Kubi. Sofia is the Executive Director and co-founder of the European Dignity Watch. It's an NGO involved in advocacy work for human rights defenders and freedom defenders. And she also, except for her advocacy work, she's involved in networking and providing education to those who care about human dignity and promote healthy family policies. So Sofia, I hand it over to you to run this panel.